As you know, I'm Sunisha. I'm a high school student from Chennai, and I'm currently studying in 12th grade. I don't want to start off with all the theory, but I want to start off with a very small, simple, short experiment for all of us to go through. I'm basically going to take you on a journey, which is something which can be a little disturbing. So this is a slight disclaimer here. So if you don't want to be a part of it, that's completely all right, and the choice is yours. So for this short experiment and this short journey, I'd like everyone to just close their eyes and imagine themselves in the respective situations I'm going to be explaining at this point in time. So firstly, let's start off with the fact that it's very hot and you're in the fields, covered up with a lot of clothing, and it's extremely hot. You're sweating, you haven't had food ever since breakfast, and it's almost about 3 p.m. So you're starving for lunch, and the breakfast you had also wasn't as substantial. That would have kept you filled for those many hours. And you're working really hard, you're working in the fields, you have some of your children working in and around as well, who are annoying you for food, and you're just there in that situation. I'd like you to take about 10 seconds to think about how you would feel and just imagine that whole scenario. Okay, so that's happened, and now it's about 5 p.m. and suddenly the masters come about, or the people who you're working under come about and say that we need you to finish off this other plot of site, which is another plot of land as well, because they don't want to push it on to tomorrow. So you're already starving, you're already hungry, so that is why that's making you angry. But you cannot protest or voice out your feelings, your opinions. So you just go ahead and do it. And it's about 6 p.m. and you ask for your daily wage. And the master says, you didn't finish this quarter section, so I'm not going to be providing your daily wage right now. It will be given tomorrow once you are done. You protest, you attempt to protest, but it doesn't work. And the one of you who spoke up is beaten. Seeing that, the rest in the group just walk away with a sad face. Now, you go home, you're walking towards your house, and suddenly you see a cafe. So you're already hungry and you see a cafe and you say, okay, it's time for me to eat now. Let me grab a bite. So you say you want to grab a bite and you enter the cafe, and in the cafe, you wait in a very long line, which is where it's completely segregated. So there's a line separate just for you, and you're the only one standing there, yet you're not attended for the past about 20 minutes. So you wait for 20 minutes and then there's finally someone to attend you. The person who attends to you finally tells you, we will not be providing any food here because they're not allowed to give you any food within that particular cafe. And that's simply because the color of your skin is different. Having had a long day, you don't want to protest again and make this a bigger issue. So you walk away. And you go to another nearby convenience store in which you pick up a piece of bread and some hot chocolate or a coffee, and you go to the billing counter to, just purchase the same. The person giving you your items for which you are paying for gives you some very dirty looks and hesitates also before giving it. And instead of giving it to you politely, he throws it at you, and it's thrown at your feet. Having been hungry for a while, you just pick it up from the floor and you walk away, sitting on the footpath and eating. People walk by and just ignore your presence there. This leads me to my very topic of the Freedom Riders. But before that, I would like to ask, what did you guys think about this particular experiment or the small journey you went through? What were some of your reactions or your initial thoughts during this entire journey? Does anyone want to go?
You can put your reaction in the chat. How did this make you feel if you yourself were that person with a different skin color and were being given this treatment?
I guess it's a lot to sink in.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna let you guys think over while I continue my presentation, and you can definitely tell me at the end. So moving on to the Freedom Riders, and this is exactly our topic of discussion. As Suchita ma'am said, it was a movement that was started off by some young minds, some young people. But it turned out to be a national movement that really helped the United States to reach the place it is at today. At the very initial thoughts, when I thought of this entire topic, I was assuming that segregation is something that is very incorrect. It is not. It is a civil right to not be segregated or not be in that position where you are being segregated. But is it truly something that everyone follows, even after it being a law until today? Not really, because I wouldn't really see why the Black Lives Matter movement would be happening unless that shift took place. So it all starts off with the fact that mentalities haven't really changed ever since then, and history seems to be repeating itself in different ways. So let's start off with what exactly happened. So the federal government says that it is now legal, completely legal, and it is a law that there is not going to be any segregation in the buses taking place, because before this particular law, the buses were different. In fact, a lot of the colored weren't even given, a transport to commute. So these people say, the government says, okay, you guys, this is not going to happen, and everyone's going to be going across in the same bus. But the problem is that although this has become a law, majority of the people's mentalities haven't really changed. And what we call the United States today was not really the United States back then, simply because when we look at the southern region, when we look at the regions apart from the south, it was a lot more industrialized, a lot more developed, as opposed to the south that was a lot more to do with agricultural land, farming. It was more like the countryside kind of a feel. So because of that, a lot of people were dependent on the Black people to do their work, and they were enjoying the luxuries of someone else doing their work during that entire scenario. So having enjoyed all of that, suddenly the government says there are protests, there are bound to be protests, and there are a numerous number of disagreements. So we have a set of young minds who come together to start off the Freedom Riders, which is basically a national movement. As I had mentioned earlier, that the South was a little more less developed, which is why the Freedom Riders, the entire route of the Freedom Riders in itself was within the South, which all started off from Washington all the way to New Orleans. This might seem like a very simple journey and a very obvious statement that everyone can sit in a bus irrespective of their skin color, but back then it was very different. So when people were in the bus, there were a set of freedom riders who sat together in the bus and they were going over the journey. Now, until a certain point, it was fine. There weren't very many issues that came up. But as they got deeper and deeper into the South, where in places like Alabama and Mississippi, there were a lot more problems because there were a lot more disagreements with the mentalities from that aspect. And there were protests against this. There was a bus that was bombed. There were the freedom riders who were there were completely well aware of what exactly is going to take place. And they actually had simulations to go through all of these kind of things. They anticipated things like the whites coming and spitting on them. They anticipated things like the whites are going to mistreat them and they are going to be beaten up. But considering the freedom riders was a non-violent protest, it started off with the fact that they had to train themselves to not react to the violence that they've been got. And it's a very simple analogy, and I really relate to it because it always moves around with the fact that you can't react to violence with violence, because otherwise there's not much of a difference between you and the person who's being violent to you. So them having been trained and having understood and anticipated and known what exactly they've signed up for played an integral role in actually making this movement a lot more impactful and a lot more extensive. So once the movement took place, before the movement took place in itself, there were a lot of applications taking place to also ensure that the people who are being a part of the Freedom Riders did not have any criminal records or did not have anything that the government or the people against them can use against them in itself, which is something that is really important, because unless that was cleared, it would have been very, very difficult to actually pull this movement off, because there was so much of opposition. So moving on to that, the whole idea behind this is that it all starts with a set of people, a set of like-minded people who actually relate to each other and build a community and actually build a tribe. But most importantly, realize what exactly they're fighting for. And as a matter of fact, the Freedom Riders or most of the Blacks actually put up human dignity even before education, which was a very disputable concept, but it made a lot of sense, because unless they had the dignity, they wouldn't have even had the whole access to education and the overall development of the nation as a whole. So moving on to what was actually done and what we should be doing now. When we talk about discrimination being a civil right, not being a civil right in itself, it all starts with education and also raising awareness. A very simple example to put this in context is that, even discussing this issue right now is still relevant today. And as I mentioned some time back, that history is repeating itself, which is something that is actually not meant to happen in logical sense, because history is meant to be developed and built upon to bring in new discoveries, new changes in mindsets, and creating those shifts. But when we talk about racism, we still haven't come back, gotten out of the whole ideology of the fact that it's okay to have not be of the same color. But it's also really integral to look at the challenges that we're faced and also report them and explain these challenges, because unless we know the challenges, we really don't realize what exactly we're signing up for. Today, many of us can be a part of the Black Lives Matter movement, but it's also important to know what challenges you would be dealing with if you're an integral asset as a part of the Black Lives Matter movement. Today, many of us can be a part of the movement just by sharing a post or putting up a story or saying that I believe this. But the actual impact is truly created only when it's reported and only when people gain awareness about it. And that really helps to change the mindset and work towards a better society to live in and a better world to live in, where we don't discriminate people based on their color or even, as a matter of fact, even on their religion and caste, which kind of ties it all down to standing up for what is truly right. So when I was also discussing this topic, I also realized that when we talk about standing up for what is right, rightness is something that comes from morality and ethics. So, and it really varies from one person to another. I might be someone who's racist and believe that's right, but other people might not. So it also comes down to looking at what is truly right and being virtuous, and also thinking about your actions and their consequences. So with that closing thought, I'd like to conclude my presentation. Thank you.